Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Ukraine This Week with me, Don Arlith. It's been another big week with the war spilling over into Poland. In the early hours of Wednesday, Polish airspace was breached by a swarm of at least 19 Russian drones during a mass air attack on Ukraine, with particular focus on the west of the country. NATO and Polish forces used decisive action to shoot down at least 3 of the drones, marking a first that Russian drones were actively engaged and shot down by Allied forces. As authorities review the facts of the incident and decide upon a response, NATO is awakening to the brutal fact that it will have to take lessons from Ukraine and to do a lot of catching up to defend against Russian drones. We'll be discussing this in just a bit, but first let's start with these stories from Ukraine. The relentless pace of strikes claims scores of lives across Ukraine this week. Russian forces deployed a so-called double-tap attack in Kramatorsk, targeting rescue workers. The evacuation of civilians continues in eastern Ukraine as Russian forces push towards Konstantinivka, which lies just 10 kilometers from the Russian positions. But it was Moscow's mass breach of Poland's airspace that hit international headlines. Polish and Allied jets downed at least 3 drones, while others crash-landed. Warsaw's NATO and European allies have pledged support to bolster air defenses on the country's eastern border. Overnight Wednesday, Russia launched 415 Shahed-type attack and decoy drones, alongside 42 cruise missiles and 1 Iskander-M ballistic missile. A day earlier, an intense airstrike on the frontline village of Yarova, located in eastern Donetsk, left at least 24 people dead and 19 others injured. The attack occurred mid-morning as residents gathered to collect their pension payments from the Ukrainian Postal Service. On Sunday, an infant was identified among the fatalities after mass missile and drone strikes pounded Kyiv, which was under an air raid alert for 11 hours. Dozens were injured in what was described as the largest barrage to hit the capital since the start of the war. Away from the front line, Russian state media is acknowledging the growing gasoline shortages in the country, but is downplaying the cause of the shortages: Ukraine's deep strike campaign. Poland's foreign minister Radosław Sikorski met Polish diplomatic staff in Kyiv on Friday, just days after Russian drones invaded Polish airspace. He said Moscow's move was not a military mistake. In the face of increased aerial attacks and lack of progress by Russia towards peace, momentum is gathering for further sanctions against Moscow. U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg met with President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Ukrainian capital, where they discussed tightening sanctions on Russia and joint arms production. Earlier, Finnish President Alexander Stubb called for more sanctions against Moscow to cripple its war economy.
Russia's economy is in bad shape. Inflation and interest rates are over 20%. Russia is moving towards a recession, which means that the war economy is grinding to a halt.
European Council President Antonio Costa at the start of the week revealed that the EU is working closely with the US on sanctions.
What we are doing now with the United States is coordinating our efforts to align our sanctions to be more effective and to put more pressure on Russia and President Putin.
Kyiv also welcomed Britain's Prince Harry, who met with Ukrainian war veterans. The visit aimed to outline how his Invictus Games Foundation plans to assist wounded Ukrainian soldiers. And joining us now is Jacek Raubo, Director of Strategic Analysis at Defense 24. Hello, Jacek. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation.
Yes, and we also have Mykola Salamakha, a retired Ukrainian lieutenant colonel and military analyst who is joining us from Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. Mykola, thank you for joining us on Ukraine This Week.
Thank you very much.
Yes, now, gentlemen, after these drone incursions, many politicians are talking about passing the test. We've heard it from the Polish Prime Minister. We've even heard it from NATO Secretary General. Did Poland pass the test, in your view? What did they get right and what needs to still be improved? And Jacek, let's go ahead and start with you.
Generally, we need to accept that still there is investigation over this kind of incident, as Secretary General and General Grinkevich told us by today meeting with press. That's why we need to be very careful with any kind of very sharp assessments, how we react and how we are able to define this reaction from the military and intelligence side. Generally, we don't have whole picture due to the fact that we need to cover still some of our assets and some of our doctrine approaches from the Russian side. So this is not the public debate. But on the other hand, I think the main aspect is visible. Right now, not only Poland, but also other NATO member states need to invest more in counter UAV systems, but not only in the dimension of military actions, but also when we think, for instance, about the security of critical infrastructure. That's why Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, they need to cover more of their territory with effective counter-drone technology. And also in Poland, we need to do the same. And of course, there is an important factor coming from our intelligence sharing and also lessons learned sharing and experiences with a Ukrainian partner. But still, I think we need to be very patient and very careful with any kind of assessments about the former reaction of a Polish system. And one more thing I would like to add by hearing this meeting with General Grinkevich and Secretary General Rutte, we have had one important aspect. Right now, NATO, not only Poland, but NATO is studying what is going on with air defense systems in the context of this last largest incursion of Russian drones into Polish airspace. And there will be a kind of a new approach by using this kind of situation in our doctrinal and technological approach to the potential future incidents like this.
Yes, now Mykola, from where you're sitting, from Ukraine, I mean, Ukrainians have lots of experience with countering these drones. And of course, the focus has often been on how much money is being expended on each wave of drone attacks. So tell me, from your side, from your optics, what do you think Poland got right in this instance, and what capabilities do you think that it is behind on and needs to obtain?
I think Russia checked the ability of Poland air defense system and checked ability of making of decision in military aspects. But results, it's not very good, not only for Poland, for NATO, and for Ukraine the same.
Yes, now, Jacek, the last time we spoke was on Wednesday morning as this was all unfolding. We didn't have all the facts yet. But you mentioned that it was NATO that basically decides the rules of engagement and you know, whether when Polish airspace is violated, whether Polish forces can shoot down the drones and under what circumstances. Am I getting that correct?
Not in a full picture, because we are depending on our infrastructure when we think about the C2 command and control system. That's why, for instance, the major role is playing by General Kalish as a operational commander. NATO is also a kind of support for our actions, and interoperability is really visible here. I little bit disagree with this opinion that this test been failed by the NATO NATO and Polish side. Of course, we would like to see a more effective counter-UAV systems spreading from the north to the south of eastern flank. But on the other hand, we sent a message that we are able to shoot down enemy aerial targets by our own Air Force power without this kind of a debate, a long debate. Do we need to use force or do we need to stop using these kinetic forms of action? And of course, there will be a kind of a modification for our own C2 or even interoperability with NATO forces in the future. But I'm not so negative in description of the present situation. But also, we need to remember, and I think I need to emphasize this again, we are still on the strong problem with checking this whole picture by having a large gaps with lack of specific definitions and specific description of our actions. So some of them, there will be no published officially because they need to be still clandestine. On the other hand, I think we need to wait more. Of course, I would like to see all of the real targets shot down by more systems, mostly ground systems, but still Poland is not inside the wartime. That's why, for instance, EW technologies cannot work constantly. So I think we need to be much more careful with this black and white picture of NATO response and also Polish response.
Indeed. Now, Mykola, based on how Poland did respond by finally shooting down some of the drones, at least 3, possibly 4, is this the type of activity that needs to be undertaken to deter Vladimir Putin from trying such incidents again?
I think it's a very difficult situation to make some decision from Ukraine for Polish military and for Polish government. But if in future we will have the same situation, but not 23 drones, or maybe 200 or 300 drones, it will be a very, very bad situation.
That is true, Jacek. If these attacks, if these waves get bigger and we'll start talking about 100 drones like Ukraine faces on a daily basis, what does that situation look like? I mean, if we go back and look at what we do know, we're talking about what? 2 F-35s, 2 F-16s, a Black Hawk, an Mi-5, and maybe some two AWACS up in the air to take care of the 19 drones. What does it look like if a huge swarm of 100 drones over the course of a night comes into Poland?
So my personal assessment for this question is based on the 3 different levels. First, with wave of drones, when we talk about drones, not only this aerial targets, but also with conventional warheads drones, we will see the full-scale aggression, and the next step is Article 5 procedure. So the situation might be much more complex with this kind of a scenario. Of course, we are talking, this is the speculation, we are talking about the possibilities. So with the wave of drones coming to our airspace, with our capabilities to track them, there will be a reaction based on the different NATO procedures and NATO standards. So this is the first aspect. The second we need to emphasize is connected with today's meeting in Brussels, when we have had, as I mentioned before, General Grinkovich and Secretary Rutte, and they told us that we are starting Eastern Sentry as a new mission, which is synchronizing our assets dislocated on the eastern flank in various states. But also, we are talking right now about the strengthening of our NATO posture in the context of aerial, also unmanned aerial vehicles threat coming from the Russia or Belarus. So that's why there will be a reinforcement coming from Germany, Denmark, France and also United Kingdom. We don't have a specific data about the numbers, about the systems they will bring to Poland, but also to other NATO members on the eastern flank. But this is the main reason I'm much more optimistic about the next potential reaction toward the major threat against airspace of Poland and also perhaps Baltic states. And the final thing I would like to present here. This is something which is inside the meeting with Secretary Rutte and General Yankovic. And this Allied Transformation Command will be the part of the response in the future perspective. That's why they will arrange more actions toward building this technological answer, sometimes with much lower cost, to destroy potential unmanned aerial threats coming from Russia. And this is a very effective tool in NATO because we are opening discussion with inventories, with our R&D sector, and the reaction will be very fast, I think. This is not only copying paste of Ukrainian lessons learned, very effective, very important, but we are able also to add something from our own R&D sectors in the various 32 member states of NATO. So there is no one complex answer for that. We need to also be very balanced in our reaction.
Yes, now obviously we have a lot to learn from Ukraine, as Ukraine has been dealing with this so much. Polish military representatives will go to Ukraine to learn how to shoot down drones and do so more cost effectively. What do you think exactly this will entail? What should it entail? Mykola.
Very interesting question. I think we need to make cooperation between Ukraine and Polish military and to have readiness Polish military to protect Polish air border all time. Not when the Ukrainian military or like in the last situation Belarusian military will report to Polish military you will have some drones in Polish area.
Well, that's a good point that you make. Why do you think Belarus did that in the first place? This was one of the threads to this whole thing that was kind of difficult to believe. But is it because that most of those drones, to the best of our knowledge, came from Belarusian airspace?
I think it's only Russian and Belarusian cooperation, and Russian use it Belarusian military only for some reconnaissance and intelligence aims in last situation.
Now, Mykola, you know, I've been to Ukraine. I've been with some of the air defense units there. I see how it works on the ground near Kyiv, for instance, where you have these air defense units spread out beyond the city, and you know they're trying to intercept the drones as they approach Kyiv. Do you think a similar system might serve Poland well to prepare itself for maybe increased, you know, incidents of these nature? And also to be cost effective, because if we're using very expensive missiles that cost 400,000 euros a shot to take down, you know, a drone that costs maybe $25,000, $35,000, well, that's not going to be very cost effective.
I think Polish military can to have not only air defense missiles or only some interceptors and interceptors missiles, but can use maybe heavy machine gun or man-pad air defense missiles, or in the same situation, we have maybe thousands maneuver groups to protect our different cities and different military and civilian sites for protection from drones. Because if we will have thousands or hundreds in future, I think it will be maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500 drones at the same time. NATO will have not capability to protect any countries in that situation.
Yes. Now, Jacek, another issue that's been highlighted here is that Ukraine has been producing these interceptor drones, and probably they're the most advanced. They're the most advanced ones out there, as NATO hasn't traditionally been focusing on that. I mean, I'm sure somewhere in the defense industry there are models that probably cost $100,000 a pop, but now these things are in high demand. Are we a little bit behind in this area?
So one comment for previously mentioned question from your side. I think we need to accept one major difference between Ukraine's situation right now and the Polish situation. We are not in the full-scale war. That's why NATO and Poland can afford to shut down sometimes this unmanned aerial system with highly expensive missiles, for instance. This is not everyday incidents, not everyday actions against the various cities spread in Poland, but also in other states of NATO. And here we are touching a very important aspect. If there will be, I hope there will be no such a scenario, but if there will be a wave of drones attacking simultaneously in major Polish cities and also Baltic state cities, etc., we are not only waiting for the strike as kind of a defensive actor. We will have also opportunity to strike back against the starting areas and also the large congregation of this kind of a weaponry inside enemy territory. So please, we need to avoid a situation that every day we are using a highly effective but still a very cost missiles, and this is a wrong decision from the military command. No, it was the first time we touched this kind of violation of Polish airspace after World War II. We use this kind of effective missiles against some of the targets, and the important aspect is how they will, of course, target acquisition. How they use these target acquisition systems. Why they shut down some of them, why others have been moved without interaction from our side. This is another discussion. We need to have more information about it. But coming back to your question, I think we need to see, of course, some developments coming from Ukraine, but still some of the systems which are the core of Ukrainian approach to Russian air actions are coming from the various states around the world, from the military support from the various states, from the West, but not only. So there is still a debate which systems need to be purchased for the Polish purposes and also for other NATO member states. And I think we are able to fulfill these visible gaps with lower levels of our air defense dedicated to shutting down some cheaper systems by kinetic strike, but also electronic warfare. The problem is, of course, the decision-making process in this procurement policy. And on the other hand, I think right now we will have a strengthening our approach to this procurement process. And also one more thing, and I will finish this long answer not only for my question. We are able to implement some of the Polish origin technologies, and some of them are highly modified by some lessons learned coming from Ukraine. We have had by a few days from now that there is a producer of systems which are effectively used by also Ukrainian armed forces against the Russian drones. So right now this is the time for action, but I think we are able to fulfill our gaps with AEW, with kinetic systems, but also with other forms of pressure against enemy unmanned aerial targets.
And Mykola, final question for you before we're just about out of time. I know that you're heavily involved with training soldiers on various simulator systems, from tanks to man-pads. Are there such systems for drones that you use? And would these be helpful maybe to train these military advisors that are going to be going to Ukraine to learn about these, drone defense? Would that be suitable for them?
Yes, of course, we are developing and producing air defense system. For example, man-pad missile Perun, Polish producing, American Stinger and Soviet Igla. But not only this heavy machine gun, air defense system, and a lot of last 4 years we made near 200 simulators, different types for Ukrainian military, for Ukrainian National Guard, and for Ukrainian state bodyguard. You can see example of one of the simulator now.
On our screen, yep, exactly. Okay, well, gentlemen, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us on Ukraine this week. Jacek Raubo, Director of Strategic Analysis at Defense 24, and Mykola Salamakha, retired Ukrainian Lieutenant Colonel and military analyst. Thank you to both of you for joining us on Ukraine this week. Appreciate it. And that's all the time we have on this edition of Ukraine This Week. Join us again next week for all the latest from the war in Ukraine. Thank you for watching and hope to see you then. Goodbye.